Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're listening. We thank you for joining us. I'm your host Ryan. Joining with me is the lovely and talented Katie.
Hi. I don't know what to say after that. That was a great introduction.
And you guys are listening to The List, where we're continuing our top 100 movies of all time countdown and really trying to tell us, oh, wow, and really trying to tell you whether or not they're worth your time. Whether it's a bucket list or a chuck it list. I'm just trying something out.
That was good. Bucket or Chuck It. That's the new name of our podcast.
Our new name?
Our new
Sounds
name.
good. Sounds like it might get mistaken for some other words, but maybe
we
not.
can get more listeners.
Maybe. All right, so we're on our 6th episode now. Today we will be going over Taxi Driver, starring Robert De Niro, Sybil Shepherd, and Jodie Foster. Taxi Driver is about a Vietnam veteran whose name is Travis Bickle, played by Robert De Niro. And after he returns home from the Vietnam War, he becomes a taxi driver in New York City. And we follow him and his descent into madness.
Let me tell you what this movie is not about. It's not about Robert De Niro slapping the top of a taxi and saying, "I'm walking here." I spent the whole movie looking for it. I was like on pins and needles.
I did too. I was like, where is this part in the movie? I'm walking here.
I'm walking here.
And it never happened. And I was like, this is not the same movie, I guess.
I'm like trying to figure out the logistics. How's he going to do that if he's driving the taxi?
Yeah. I was waiting for it too, and it never happened. So
my score
I don't know what
0.
movie that is, but
my score
it's
is
not
0
this
out of
one.
10 on everything for disappointment.
Spoiler.
Spoiler. Just because of the "no, I'm walking here" scene.
So you want to remind everybody what our criteria are for judging?
Absolutely. We're judging based on story, acting, cinematography, and wow factor. I always have to say it like that. You can't just say wow factor in a normal way.
You can't say boring like wow.
No, because then what's the wow factor? It's wow factor. You have to say it in a wow factory, a wow factory way.
I agree with you.
Good.
So what do you want? You want to start with cinematography?
Sure. Do you want me to start or do you want to jump in? You tell me.
Go for it.
It's because you know I'm impressionable. Okay. So cinematography was very good. I feel like after the One Room movie,
Rear Window.
I feel like after Rear Window, cinematography is a little harder to live up to for me because I know you said it was above average for you, but I was super impressed by that cinematography. This was a different caliber of cinematography to me. The shots, you're supposed to have some time to sit and get a feel of what Travis's life is like and what his mental state is like. And a lot of that is done in the taxi with him, which leads to a lot of really cool shots of what's going around and happening in New York City. And I thought the cinematography was probably, I'm torn between saying 8.5 and 9. So I'm going to just go ahead and round it up to a 9. It was good cinematography. It was good in that it really, the shots really helped you settle into what he's feeling and what his day-to-day life is like. And the color scheme that was used, I feel like gave it the real gritty feel that you needed for this movie. Even just his choice of colors to use in the shots helped set the tone of what was happening in his life and what was coming in the movie.
I agree. The cinematography was really kind of cerebral. I felt like it definitely had this dark, gritty feel to it, as it should for this movie, because that's kind of his thing, is that New York City is this filthy cesspool that, there's no good people left in it type of deal. And that's kind of what you get through the cinematography. There's a lot of weird kind of transitions and fades, and that kind of make it almost as if sometimes you can't tell whether it's reality that is actually being seen or if it's the point of view from the character and his distorted view on the world. And I think that really actually added a lot to the film. Just the dark color, the grittiness, the psychedelic, cerebral, I don't know.
Ooh.
I don't know what you
Psychedelic's
want
a
to
good
say.
word.
It
I
really
like
is kind
that.
of
Good job.
psychedelic vibe
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I think 8.5 as far as cinematography for me.
Yeah.
Story. So story for me was kind of hit or miss. It is a weird story, which I don't mind weird movies at all. But for me, being a trained medical person, I feel like there was a lot of hit or misses as far as his psychiatric condition was concerning to me. Like, it was like a hodgepodge of all these different types of psychological disorders that kind of threw off my suspension of disbelief a little bit, because he's got elements of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, he's got insomnia, he's got depression, he's got anti-personality disorder, he's got narcissistic personality disorder, he's got borderline personality disorder. I mean, he's got all these little different things mixed into there. And for me, it kind of threw me off a little bit, just because my dumb brain is sitting there trying to figure out what is wrong with this guy. And you don't really notice that there's something wrong with him to begin with, because he's kind of a charismatic guy to begin with. And I think, though, that Robert De Niro did an excellent job of portraying this lunatic who, you like, but you don't like at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's a delicate balance. And I think he did a really good job of portraying that, even though I don't think, as far as the psychology goes, it was kind of hit and miss for me there.
That's hard for you to turn off, huh?
Definitely. Absolutely.
We can't watch anything that is like a fun little mainstream medical drama. The whole time you're like, this is not accurate.
Oh yeah.
Unless it's Scrubs, you're
Scrubs
like, yeah, this is totally accurate.
One.
I tried to watch like The Resident with the guy from Gilmore Girls in it, and you're like, absolutely, this is not real. It's hard for you to turn off, huh?
It's been ingrained in there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think the other elements of the story, there's a little bit of a love story there. There's this element of him wanting to be a hero. There's this.
Do you think he wanted to be a hero?
I think he thought what he was doing was necessary.
But not heroic. I don't think he thought it was heroic.
Oh, I think he thought it was heroic.
I think there were points of the movie where he was like, I'm going to clean up New York City or whatever. And that part felt heroic to him. But I think that's the part exactly that he thought was the heroic I
part
think at some point it turned from wanting to be a hero to being vindictive. But
see,
I don't know.
And I thought that at first, but then I'm thinking back on the movie and looking at other aspects. After Sybil Shepherd's character kind of dumps him because he doesn't understand social cues and ends up trying to take her to a
hardcore,
a dirty movie.
Yeah.
And she
not
leaves
even just
and
like a
doesn't want
little bit of a
anything to
dirty
go with
movie.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like it could be mistaken as maybe normal. He took her somewhere where most functioning people would know this is not appropriate.
Especially not a first date, for sure.
Yeah, right. Which was my first sign, by the way. That was the turning point for me, where I was like, okay, this guy is like really not well.
Yeah. But the scene where he goes back to confront her, he's just like, oh, in the beginning, he's like, she's an angel. Nothing, this city can't touch her. And
Yeah.
then when he goes back and talks to her, tries to talk to her, and she won't talk to him, he's like, you're just like the rest of them. You're just like
Yeah.
the rest of them. And so I think he starts to think that because the political candidate who she was helping to support, because she was dirty and trash just like the rest of the people, that the candidate was too, and that the best way to get rid of them, best thing to do would be to get rid of them.
That was
I
not how
honestly
I saw
think
it.
I think that's how I see it for that
Yeah,
character.
that's
But
super interesting because that's not how I saw it at all. I saw him as like the world's biggest nice guy. He's great until things aren't great, and then he's going to burn the world down. And it felt to me that he was, instead of seeing it as cleaning up, he was seeing it as, what can I do to hurt her the most? How can I destroy her?
and
I
I
mean, he's
see
not
how
going to hurt her. He still holds out hope that she will one day see him the way he wants her to, and so he's not going to hurt her. But he wanted to hurt her without taking her away from the world, and the way he was going to do that was by hurting the politicians. So I see what you're saying, and you're probably right, but that's not the way I saw it as a viewer.
yeah, and I can see how you would see that from your point of view too. I think both are valid interpretations of that.
So what
So
would you rate it
story-wise,
story-wise then?
I think maybe a 7 for me. It would have probably been higher if the psychological elements would have gelled together a little bit nicer for me, but 7.
It's a really hard, it's a really difficult answer for me. I'm trying really hard to learn how to separate my enjoyment in a movie from whether or not the movie is a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've had a couple of days since we've watched it and I'm a little further away from it, it's easier. So I'm going to try to look at it a little more clinically and say there were parts that were boring to me, but it's because this is a slower paced movie and you really needed time to sit with him in his taxi and get the feel of him. So I think knowing that it was a little boring because it was meant to be a slow start. Looking at it as a movie that is kind of a character study, I'm actually going to give the story a 9.5. I think that Scorsese did a really good job of tricking you in the beginning, of thinking this is maybe just a guy who's a little bit messed up from the war. But otherwise, he's very charismatic and you're really going to like him and you're going to want to follow in this story of him trying to find his place in New York City, and then slowly turning the page on you and saying, maybe not so much a normal guy. Maybe the war didn't do this to him. Maybe he was really messed up from the beginning. And maybe you're not watching a story about somebody trying to find their place in the city. You're watching a story about somebody who is violently deranged. And it was a difficult watch. It was a very difficult watch, but just looking at it from whether or not it's a good story, I'm going to have to say it's a 9.5. It was a good idea. It was executed well. It took you along for the ride. Maybe other people saw it. I always am a little hesitant to share how surprised I was by things because maybe everybody else in the world who's seen Taxi Driver sat down knowing what it was about, but I'm so removed from, we
like going into movies surprised, not knowing anything about it.
I don't want to know
that's how we
anything.
went into this.
And obviously I didn't know anything about the movie because I thought this was the You Walk in Here movie. And knowing utterly nothing, I spend the first, I don't want to say half of the movie, I don't think it lasts that long, but up until the moment after they have their first date, I spend the entire part of that movie rooting for this guy. And even after that turning point,
madness with him.
Even after that turning point, I'm waiting. Where is the redemption? Where is the moment where you're going to redeem this character and pull me back in? I'm almost kind of irritated at her for not giving him another chance. Like, how messed up is that? He takes her to a hardcore pornographic movie, which without her consent, without her knowing what's coming, making her very uncomfortable. I barely know this guy. We met on the side of the road basically, and now he's taken me to this movie that I didn't consent to go to. And yet still I'm like, oh, answer the phone. You know what I mean? Like there's a little part of me that's like, maybe he just didn't understand. And so just the tiniest part of me is still rooting for him for a little bit. And so for him to have been able to do that just speaks to the wonderful storytelling, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
Though there does come a point where I was no longer rooting for him. It didn't take long after that.
No, this is like, you looking at me? You looking at me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this movie,
So-
right? Not the other one.
And I'm watching that in horror, by the way.
Mhm.
Is this a horror movie?
I mean,
Is it classified as a horror movie?
no, I don't think so.
No?
I think it's just drama.
And I did want to say it was a nice break from I wanted it to be a nice break from all the old movies. And I know it's still an older movie, but like this week we're going into the 1930s again. So we've had some really old movies.
Yeah.
I really wanted it to be a nice break. Something a little more recent.
I agree. It was a tough watch just because of the
Yeah.
darkness and
It was a very hard watch.
the concept of the
Yeah.
whole film. And
Right.
it kind of really weighs down on your emotions.
It
right?
does.
And so it makes it hard to separate that
watch.
from
It's hard to
some of
watch.
the good elements that they have in the movie. Okay.
Which I think is what's helped us so much on this podcast is to give ourselves a couple of days. You're the one who wanted to do that. I wanted to sit down the minute the movie was done and start talking. And you were like, no, I think we need a couple of days. And we do, because it helps you remove yourself from the immediate emotion and be able to see it was difficult to watch, but it was still top tier storytelling.
Yeah. And what makes it so difficult too is to go back and watch some of these old movies and try to keep the concept of time involved in it too. So I imagine
that
this
nobody
film
had
was
done this
probably
before.
pretty groundbreaking for the time that it came out, because I
A
doubt
movie
there's
about a
many
character you
movies
don't
about
like.
this.
Or just
Yeah.
about an unlikable character. How
I don't know
many
if you want to
unlikable
call him an
characters were there?
anti-hero, or I don't know
Yeah.
what he
I've
would be
hesitated
classified
to call
as,
him that
but
a couple of times. A couple of
Yeah.
times I almost wanted to say it, but I don't even want to give him
the
I don't even
hero.
want to say the word
Yeah.
hero about him, because I feel like if you come out of this movie and think that he was heroic, something is
you
may
probably
want to go talk to a psychiatrist. I'm not joking. Like,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to leave this movie and think, wow, he really did something. I left this movie thinking, how did this man trip and fall into doing what he did, and not like blowing up the world? I don't
Yeah.
know. It was not a story about a hero at all.
No. Acting, though, and we kind of touched on this, phenomenal. I mean,
10.
9.5.
The acting is a 10 for me.
Yeah, Robert De Niro alone was, I mean, he was the star.
Whew.
He did
Yeah.
a pretty amazing job of convincing me he was insane.
And because it's so subtle too. You're watching him thinking, okay, he's a little damaged from
off.
the war.
Right.
Okay, maybe he's like just doesn't understand that you're not supposed to do this. And then you brought up that scene where he's like, "Are you talking to me?" And I'd seen it so many times in like pop culture references that you
But you
expect
didn't know the
to
context
enjoy
behind
it or think it's funny when he says it. But
No, it's
I'm
horrifying.
watching it like sick, literally sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
This man has fully and completely lost it. Like completely. And it's like Rear Window when he's watching what's happening and can't do anything about it. And you can see the sickness that he's feeling, knowing he can't do anything about it. That's how I felt watching that scene, I was like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
not going well.
Yeah.
And
When you
I
put the
have to sit here
context
and
with
watch
it,
it.
it's like, whoa, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that this is what this was.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I'm going to say Robert De Niro did an incredible job because he is a person, by all means, you should not sympathize with this character. And I want to say you don't sympathize with the character
But you do
by
it
the
in some
end at
points.
least, but you do.
Hmm.
That you can sit there and watch an entire movie with him as the main character and still sit through the movie understanding what he's going through and why he's making the decisions he's making and exactly what he's feeling is top tier acting to me. The Ingrid, Jodie Foster, that
Mm.
she can simultaneously be a prostitute and a completely innocent child, like the dichotomy of that was played so well. That acting was top tier to me. That the guy who was her pimp, I guess is what it was. What
Oh
was his name?
yeah, I forget his name. They call him
Anyway,
Matthew in the film, but he's very
that
famous, and
Matthew
the name is
is
slipping me.
that he's a piece of garbage pimping out a 12-year-old girl, but still comes across as charismatic.
Hmm.
It's just the way that there were so many characters that were one thing but also existed in the same realm as another thing
Hmm.
was top tier acting to me. It's a very difficult thing to do, to be two things at once, to be a terrible person pimping out a 12-year-old and also be charismatic,
Yeah,
to be losing your mind but also be semi relatable. I just thought the acting was outstanding.
I agree. It was very good acting. Very good. Okay. And wow factor.
I don't know what to say.
Wow factor. I think the wow factor for me is the cinematography is great. The storytelling is pretty darn good. The acting, that's the wow factor for me. And it's hard. I know for you, you said in the past that the wow factor for you is emotional.
It's emotional, yeah.
And for me, it was kind of emotional too, but it was like in a like I'm
Gross way.
disgusted, like
Yeah.
disgusted with this character. This is a dark, gritty, gory movie, and that's the wow factor. I mean, whether that's a good wow factor, I don't really,
Yeah.
I don't think so, but it is a wow factor. And so I probably had to put that about an 8 for me,
Oof, you're right.
combining all of those things.
You're right that just because something makes you feel disgust or a bad feeling can in and of itself be an indicator of how good a film is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I had a strong emotional reaction to it, but
Very strong.
not a positive one.
The scene where she's like dancing with Matthew. Ingrid is dancing with
Yeah.
Matthew, and she's 12 years old, and he's a full grown adult. And he's like, I'm in love with you. I wish every person in the world knew what it was like to be in love with you. And I was just violently repulsed. It was
Mhm.
repulsive to watch,
Right.
but the whole movie was so hard to watch. But how do you separate yourself from that feeling? And I don't know.
You
I'm
don't.
gonna give I'm gonna give the wow factor maybe like a 7, but it's a very loosely given 7 just because I
Hmm.
still am battling with how I feel about this movie.
Yeah.
I just don't
So for
know.
me, overall, I think this is, to me, this is not a bucket list movie, even though it has some really great elements. I think overall, it's not a movie I would recommend for a lot of people. Especially, this is not a kids movie. This is
No.
not a most adult movie either. I feel like just because of the dark grittiness and the gory nature of the movie, it's
I
a little rough.
I feel like if you're a film buff, if like it's your thing that you're really just into
You'll
film, you should
you'll
watch it.
appreciate the elements, and like we said, we appreciated some of the elements. It's just
Yeah.
the overall impression that they gave us was it's just a dark, gritty feeling, and
I also
I
just
don't
want to
care to see
say
that in most of my films. That's just me personally.
I do want to say that if you struggle at all with any kind of mental health issues, I would not watch this movie. I have a very difficult time with gore. And when I say it was a hard watch, I mean it was a very hard watch. And if we were not filming this, I don't think I would have been able to finish the movie. As it was, I had to sit the last few minutes of the movie with my hands over my eyes. It was rough. It was really rough. So if you struggle with gore at all, if you struggle with watching people who have mental illness and watching them kind of spiral down, if that's triggering for you, I would say don't watch this. But otherwise, if you're very into film, if you like dark movies, if you like a gritty story, if you like a character study, if you like a deep dive into the less talked about people in America, if that's your kind of thing, watch it. It is a stellar movie. Is it enjoyable? I don't know.
All right. Well, let's share our screen and rank our decisions.
Oh, I forgot mine.
I'll give you a minute and I'll rank mine here.
Okay.
All right. So just to review, I have Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean as number 1. Number 2 is Rear Window. Number 3 is Yankee Doodle Dandy. Number 4 is North by Northwest. Number 5 is The Third Man. And I'm going to put Taxi Driver. I'm actually going to put it at number 6, just because the overall impression for me was a negative emotion one, not because it wasn't a good, well thought out, calculated film. It just wasn't for me personally. And so that's why I'm ranking it a little bit lower than I probably normally would.
Okay. I'm literally making this decision as I'm looking at it. I still don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually rank it a little differently than you did. I think instead of ranking it on how much I enjoyed it, I guess, I think that the thing is that it's a balance of what I enjoyed and how struck I am by.
No, you're ranking this. You should rank this based on, is this one of the best movies, top 10 movies of all time, and where it falls in that category.
Okay, if
and you
I'm
need
ranking,
to take in all the elements, including your emotional reaction to it.
if I'm ranking,
Because that's what you've been doing the whole time, right?
Yeah. If I'm ranking this based on if this is like a top 10 movie, I don't think it will stay on my list for long, but I do think I would rank it. I think I'm going to have to put it number 4.
Wow. Okay.
It's not going to stay number 4.
I can see how you could put it there. I could see that. I mean, it's got elements that are really artsy and cutting edge, and
I think it's just how struck I am by it. The movie as a whole really struck me, and putting aside that it was not one of the most enjoyable movies I've ever watched, I get it. And it's more that it's above the other 2 movies for me. It's above North by Northwest and it's above Yankee Doodle Dandy for me. But I will say for this top 10 list, the top 3 are the only ones that I'm like, these belong in a top 10 movie list. And the other ones are just kind of there as which one's going to drop off the top 10 list first. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at the list as it is, I would say Taxi Driver is above Yankee Doodle Dandy and North by Northwest. But those 3 movies for me are not going to stay on my top 10 list, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated with the movies we've seen so far because I really only think about 2 of them belong on the.
I think so too. I'm really surprised by that.
Bucket list movie so far.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, we have a lot more movies to watch, and hopefully things.
Hopefully, we'll get to some that we're like, you have to
we
sit
get
down and watch this right
impressed
now.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
But for me so far, I haven't been super impressed except by maybe 2 movies.
I don't think I'm going to be impressed this week either. Maybe I'll be eating my words in the next podcast, but Wuthering
we'll see.
Heights, I feel a little nervous that a lot of this list is just, I don't know, it's just like, oh, it's a classic. It has to be on there. Do you know what I mean?
Well, this list is based on not how popular it did in the box office, not on ratings from people who have seen it. This is based on actual awards and accolades that it got from the film industry.
And
right?
also,
and so that they look at stuff a little different than we do, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's interesting to then watch them as very not qualified viewers.
Yeah.
So it's fun to kind of watch.
Well, I think that's the interesting part is like they thought this was cutting edge and worthy of, Academy Awards. And
they're looking at it from a very different lens too, though. They're very educated on film,
and we are basically rating this based on, elements that we can appreciate
as pedestrians,
and the emotional reaction, enjoyability part. So we're kind of combining the two, even though we don't have the expertise that, people who make film and study film for their entire lives do. Right.
Yeah. And I will say too, these are movies I never would have watched otherwise. I mean, obviously I haven't. I'm 35 years old and I've never touched any of these movies, and they're the bare basic classics.
35, you are old.
I know. I meant 31. I'm really bad at math. 29?
Cradle robber. Anywho,
it's been fun so far, but it's getting to the point to me where it's kind of difficult to know where to put some of them, because
it's going to get harder.
I can see why they're good, but I don't know. And I think the further removed I am from Taxi Driver 2, the more I appreciate and enjoy it. When a movie is that difficult to watch in the moment, it's hard to appreciate it. I remember the look I gave you when the movie was over. I was like, really?
I'm pretty sure you said, "Are you looking at me?" And I got a little scared.
And just to talk about, okay, here's a spoiler alert. Just to talk about the end, this man had fully lost it. He was gone. And then it kind of pissed me off to see that we know like what he is and how lost he is. And then there's these newspaper clippings calling him a hero. And that's terrifying. That's terrifying that he lost his mind and went on a murder spree and is called a hero because he accidentally killed like a mafia boss or something. He's a nutbag.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anywho, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please continue to support us and watch us so we can make more of these and let you know whether it's worth your time to actually watch some of these films. If you have any comments or questions, please let us know. You can comment on our YouTube page. You can also comment on Spotify.
Leave us a voicemail.
I'm still on the fence about the voicemails, but yes, you can. Supposedly. And we'll see you next week. I'm Ryan.
Well, Wuthering Heights. That's how they all talk.
Oh yeah, Wuthering
Heights. You're not saying it right.
Wuthering Heights. That old granny voice?
Yeah, do it.
Wuthering Heights.
That was better. We'll work on it. Next week it'll be better. I'll coach him.
The List with Kat and Ryan.
Goodbye.
Peace.